Looks like we're live on YouTube right now, Kevin, just a heads up.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dane.
That mean we're ready to roll?
Let's roll.
I got 7, so yep.
All right, 7 o'clock. I will now call this meeting of the Westfield, Washington Township Board of Zoning Appeals to order. And the first item of business is to note the presence of a quorum. Mr. Crabtree.
Ms. Fortier.
Here.
Mr. Kingstill.
Present.
Mr. Raines.
Present.
Mr. Schmitz.
Here.
Mr. McCarty.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item to address is approval of the minutes for the last 2 meetings, the March 10th, 2020 and the April 14th, 2020 meeting. Having had the opportunity to review those minutes, does anyone have any questions, comments, or corrections regarding either of those 2 minutes?
Mr. President, this is Brian Zager. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yes, there was an issue that came up with the petitioner's attorney for Essler. I believe it was on the March 10th, 2020 meeting. And the question is the condition that was placed on his approval and the 60 days that was granted. Is he allowed to operate for those 60 days, or was the 60 days going to start from the time he received his letter? In other words, did the 60 days start on March 10th, or does it start when you approve the minutes and the grant goes out?
Kind of, my recollection of it was that we were going to start it right away.
Could your minutes be amended to verify that?
Yeah, I would suggest then that Mr. Raines made the motion. So Martin, if I guess everyone kind of think back if there was discussions that to the contrary, then Martin, if you could, the 4th bullet could be amended to say the full sign structure in its entirety shall be removed within 60 days after this hearing. Does that meet your needs, Brian?
I thought it was fairly clear, and that's our standard practice, but the petitioner was making that request. And so all I'm requesting today is that your minutes reflect that the 60 days started from the grant on the day it was granted.
Okay.
So this is Ken. I've got a comment there. I believe if the 60 days started on the date of the hearing, of the meeting, then I believe those 60 days are up now. And the last, I drove by there a week ago and the sign structure was, the pole was still up.
Yes.
And is it still up today?
Yes.
So if we amend the minutes to reflect, I wasn't at the meeting, but if you amend the minutes to reflect that it was 60 days from the date of the meeting, then that puts them into violation right now.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make that clear.
This is Martin. I was getting ready to say the exact same thing Ken just did. So
sorry.
I think it was quite clear what we listed.
I believe, this is Sager again, I believe it was too, and if I remember, I even asked the petitioner if that was okay. But that's fine. If you verify that, that'll clear it up.
I think Ken's clear. I think all of us. I mean, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but what Ken just said, It's exactly what I was just getting ready to say. So I think it's quite clear what we meant.
This is
So-
Janine, and yes, I agree. It was from that date. So I agree with everyone else.
When Dave adjourned the meeting, it was when that gavel hit the thing, it was 60 days.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion then to approve the March 10th, 2020 BZA meeting minutes with the correction that regarding case 1912 VU07, correct the fourth condition of the approval to read the pole sign structure in its entirety shall be removed within 60 days of this hearing. Do we have a second?
I apologize, guys. This is Martin. Are we, just as long as we're clear on that? I don't want to elaborate on any of us to have to think, we're going to be doing this again in a month or two. So, but I'm going to second that. So.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the March meeting minutes with the noted correction. All those in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. Crabtree?
Yep. Ms. Fortier,
Yes.
Mr. Kingshill,
Yes.
Mr. Raines,
Yep.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. With respect to the April 14th minutes, do we have any questions, comments, any corrections for those minutes? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to adopt the BZA minutes from April 14th, 2020.
This is Ken. I'll
This is
second.
Victor, and I'll make the motion, or I'll second. Never mind.
Motion by myself, seconded by Mr. Kingshill to approve the BZA minutes from April 14th. Mr. Crabtree, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Fortier,
Yes.
Mr. Kingshill,
Yes.
Mr. Raines,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Both sets of minutes are approved. So I guess we need to review the rules and procedures even though we don't have a public hearing.
Yes.
Well, anyway.
Go ahead and do that. And due to the COVID-19 emergency as declared by the Governor of Indiana, the format and conduct of the meeting has been modified to comply with executive orders regarding the conduct of public meetings, public hearings, and public gatherings. Relevant portion of the Indiana open door law have been amended or suspended during the pendency of the emergency. For the petition tonight, the meeting has the following structure. The department will summarize the petition and describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. Then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the board. The president of the board will call on each member to provide comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments. As noted, there are no public hearings this evening. So just a comment for the BZA members and petitioners, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. So this item, the only item on the agenda tonight is 2004-VS-06345 East Park Street, Petitioner John Long. We heard this matter and conducted a public hearing at our April meeting. Let's see, this is Caleb's, yes. Mr. Ernest, are you here to give any kind of introduction to this matter, or what format what course of action do we do to move this along?
Yeah, so I'll give a brief introduction, and then I believe the representative and applicant both plan on speaking. So,
okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. Without further, Caleb Ernest with the Community Development Department. The property is zoned SF3, single-family medium-density district. It is located at 345 East Park Street. The surrounding properties, just as a reference, to the north, west, and east are also zoned the SF3 district. The property to the south is zoned the MF2 multifamily medium density district. Just as a quick summary, the petitioner is requesting variances of development standard as follows: to reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 30 feet to 7.5 feet, to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 10 feet to 5 feet, and to reduce the minimum lot size from 12,000 square feet to 6,500 square feet. This item was tabled at the April 14th BZA meeting, where it received its public hearing. Since that meeting and the public comments that were presented at that meeting, no new comments have been received. The representative, Jeffrey Lauer, as well as the applicant, John Long, are both present tonight, and I believe they both plan on briefly presenting. When they are finished presenting, they are available for questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lauer?
Hey, thank you, everybody. Good evening, members of the board. Thank you, Caleb, for the introduction. For the record, Jeffrey Lauer of Polis Collaborative, LLC, representing the petitioner here this evening. I want to keep my comments pretty brief. We went into a lot of detail at the last meeting, addressing some of the recommendations and comments from the Grand Junction Task Group and some of your comments and questions. Obviously, we'll be available at the end for any additional questions, but I think the kind of the biggest things that we wanted to address tonight was really just giving you an update since the last meeting, and then just kind of finishing with some final thoughts. So, overall, we feel the request is straightforward and driven really by necessity. We're just looking to reduce the setbacks that apply to the property per the UDO, so that we can build a single-family home on the property per the current zoning. As you know, per the discussion last time, you can see the plot plan here, which has the platted setbacks. And in addition, what it doesn't show is a 30-foot rear yard setback that the UDO requires, which essentially leaves us 16 feet and unable to build anything on this lot. So at the last hearing, there was discussion around the Grand Junction Task Group recommendations, comments and questions around prior conversations with the city. So we've spent the delay since the last hearing trying to continue the dialogue with the city. So the first major update is my client, John Long, KBC Group LLC, has had a few conversations with the city administration, with the mayor primarily, and I'll let him. I was not involved in those conversations, so I'll let him kind of characterize those phone calls and go into details and specifics if there's any questions. But overall, the gist that I understand is that the city does not have an interest in purchasing the property, but is interested in seeing the property in the area redevelop, and would be looking for kind of a private, market solution to it. And then, unfortunately, the second update, which has kind of driven us back here to the board, again, out of necessity, was that the buyer that we had at the first meeting under contract to purchase the lot is no longer under contract. They walked away due to the delay and the uncertainty kind of surrounding the variance, so which has kind of added another financial consideration and hardship for the client. After the buyer was no longer under contract and could walk away, and we had learned that there really wasn't an interest from the city in at least purchasing the property, we being the client and I, John Long and I, briefly discussed ways that we might even assemble the area to try to bring about something that might more resemble what the Grand Junction Task Group and the city are looking for. But we pretty quickly concluded that it was not feasible for a redevelopment project, certainly at this time. Just to give you an example, a local broker has listed the property on the corner, so 306 Park Street, which is just, I guess 2 or 3 doors down to the west from our lot for $350,000 for a third of an acre. And presumably would have the same rear yard, at least the same rear yard setback standard and restriction that applies to our lot. We had conversations with some of the existing owners to possibly assemble some of this property. We learned pretty quickly the price expectations are all pretty much about the same, and at the end of the day, it just would not be feasible, certainly anytime soon, for a redevelopment of any kind of density to happen there. So I guess the long and short of it, I mean, without a contracted buyer, without interest from the city, and without really any kind of viable or feasible way to assemble or look to a redevelopment of the property, we really felt we had no choice but to come back before you tonight and seek approval. And like I said before, we feel that when you really focus and look at just what applies to this property and the request we have before you this evening, it is very straightforward. We're just looking to remove or reduce the setback restrictions that apply to the property so that a house can be built in downtown in this property and be a part of the downtown community. Without these variances, to put it very simply, without these variances, this property is essentially useless. The restrictions are so, with what is platted and what's required by the UDO, the restrictions are so much that, like we said, it leaves about a 16-foot strip in the center of the property that really can't be developed for any practical purpose. And at the end of the day, denying the variance as we've requested to reduce the setbacks really forces my client to participate in a redevelopment project that he doesn't really particularly want to participate in because there has been interest. Obviously, we had a previous buyer, but have had some subsequent interest from home builders for the property, and so there is an immediate interest from the market, from the private market, to do single-family homes. But more importantly, it forces him to participate in a redevelopment project that may never come or may not come for quite some time. And so, at the end of the day, we hope that you'll approve this variance request as is presented before you this evening, so that the property may be used for its zoned purpose today, and we would be allowed to build a single-family home and be a part of the downtown community. Happy to go into any detail about some of those updates from the last meeting, but I'll kind of leave it there for now and just open up for questions from the board. I think, John, if you had anything you wanted to add, feel free, but I'll kind of leave my comments here.
Thank you, Mr. Lauer. Mr. Long, did you have anything you wish to add?
Only thing that I would add is just that it is a home site in a neighborhood that we're talking about, and so I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that property in front and a couple doors down are both homes, and that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. First off, I appreciate your effort, Mr. Lauer, this is Dave Schmitz, appreciate your effort in talking to neighbors and attempting to aggregate the property and have some overall, some effort towards an overall plan for that area. I think as soon as he started talking about that, I was hoping, great, that could be the answer to this, is to have a comprehensive plan to address this issue that could maybe accommodate what you're doing and have something that makes sense going forward. So it's unfortunate that the other landowners in your area aren't on the same page, but I do appreciate you making that effort. Other members of the board, do you have any questions or comments for the petitioner or his representative?
This is Victor. I'll just say that I concur with your thoughts on that and appreciate reaching out. Again, it would be nice to have a overall comprehensive plan for whatever is going to happen in that area. But given the circumstances, again, I appreciate your effort on that part.
This is Martin. I definitely concur with that last statement. I believe they've gone above and beyond to get information. They've done their due diligence, exactly what they think they can do, and the future purposes, and you know, I appreciate them giving us an update. So.
Maybe a question for Caleb or anyone on staff. As I look at these aerials, the platted front yard setback is 30 feet, yet it doesn't appear that the two houses on Park Street have anywhere near a 30-foot setback. So that seems to be kind of an onerous provision when you have to push the house, the petitioner has to push the house 30 feet back from the right-of-way and build a decent-sized house. That therein lies the problem with their 30-foot rear yard setback. So is that why do those other houses appear to not be in compliance with that 30-foot front yard setback?
So it's possible that in some cases such as this, that the houses were either built not following the current standards of the UDO or the recorded plat, thus creating a legal nonconforming or illegal nonconforming situation, or in similar situation where they were platted before, they were built before any plat or UDO was, the standards were there to guide the construction of the houses.
And I can jump in. This is Jeffrey with Polis. I can jump in as well, just to add that, oddly enough, I mean, well, our understanding is that this whole area, the Watson subdivision, was subdivided at the same time. So it's possible that some of these other lots may have different platted setbacks to them. I have not seen the title work or survey or plot plans for them specifically, so I can't say exactly. But oddly enough, the platted setback that you'll see on the plot plan we provided at 30 feet is actually more onerous than what the UDO requires, which is only 20 feet. Right. But even still, even if we had 20 feet and still had the 30-foot setback in the back, we'd still only gain an additional 10 feet, 26 feet deep, which would still be very restrictive for, you know, the kind of and quality of home that we were looking to, and quality of buyer that we were looking to put on this lot. So we probably still need, relief from that setback, even if it was 20 feet. But more importantly, I mean, the 30-foot setback is not as big of a deal as long as we can get the relief from the rear yard setback to be consistent with that utility easement in the back.
This is Schmitz. What's the utility easement issue?
Well, it's not an issue. If you see on the plot plan, it says 7.5 feet. It's a utility easement that runs in the back of the property. So we can't build anything back there anyway. So in order to seek relief from the rear yard setback, we were just saying, let's just make the rear yard setback the same as that utility easement line, and then we'll have enough to build on. So.
Okay, I follow. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Anyone else have any comments on this? Questions for the petitioner? I guess my overall, this is Schmitz again, still, I'll move this forward and maybe throw some thoughts out there and others can consider them or disregard them. I guess my concern, one of your requirements of the petitioner is to establish the use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. And I've had that concern from the start, and that to me is kind of where the planning organization, the Grand Junction Task Force chimed in on, that they weren't completely on board basically for that reason. And that, you know, it suggests to me if the guy 2 doors down is trying to sell a vacant lot for the price you mentioned, that kind of suggests that others in the area are looking for other uses for this property as well. It's certainly not dispositive. It doesn't mean much, but that to me kind of suggests, kind of reinforces my thought that this may not be the highest and best use of this ground, and at least that you haven't established that it is, which is your obligation as a petitioner. Does anyone else have any thoughts along those or other lines?
This is Ken. I would concur with what you just said. You stated it well. I was struggling to try to come up with a similar thought, and you just said it. So I agree with that.
This is Janine, and I agree with Mr. Smits and King Hill.
Yeah, I can, if I can just respond there. Just, you know, kind of an initial thought would be our burden is to show that the surrounding properties would not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. I don't think it is the same to say that our burden is to show that there is a potentially higher and better use or potentially higher and better value. I think those are two different things. I think that, you know, I think it's very clear and demonstrable that we can that the surrounding area would not be substantially adversely affected. The values would not be substantially adversely affected. In that, you know, this is a currently vacant lot. It's an area that has not seen reinvestment in quite some time, and you know, the addition of a new single-family home that, you know, probably would range in the ballpark of you know, the high, you know, low threes to, you know, $350,000, somewhere in there is, you know, would be a substantial improvement to the area, and at least one of the homeowners in the area believed that and submitted a letter to the board stating that. So, you know, it's not our burden is not necessarily to show, you know, it doesn't really relate to the use. You know, we don't have to show that there's a higher and better use, but that the surrounding area won't be adversely affected, and we think it's pretty clear that it wouldn't be. And, you know, I understand your comment completely, Dave. I just, you know, the reason I had mentioned that was just simply to show that that gave us, when that property was listed, it gave us kind of the impetus to dive in a little further to look at, you know, whether or not, like, hey, you know, my client does own the property currently. There are other surrounding properties. We clearly understand the desire of the city here. So let's see if we can, you know, we can try to make something work. And, you know, the values that were being expected, and that assumes that all of those owners would even be willing to sell. We don't know that to be the case. But of the people we did talk to who expressed some willingness to sell, the values that were expected just didn't make it feasible. And honestly, we even assumed, not to go into too much detail, but we even assumed, based on some of the comps that we know from townhome projects and things like that have happened in the you know, in both the Carmel, Westfield area and some other areas, that even if the city threw in the ground that they owned for free, it still may not be that feasible based on the values that some of the other owners are expecting in that area. And again, assuming that they would even be willing to sell. So we quickly concluded after that really our only choice would be to go back to the market and secure a buyer, but we can't do that without getting these variances. And without these variances, we can't do anything with the property. So.
This is Schmitz again. Excuse me. It's unfortunate that the neighbors didn't recognize that process of planning that area would be to everyone's benefit, whether they want to sell or not. Just because it would allow for investment for those who want to invest or who want to sell, but doesn't require those who don't to sell their property or I mean, you didn't have to aggregate the land necessarily. It's more getting heads together to create a plan for the area. And so, I mean, I can see if they don't want to sell, sure, that's fine. But we've had, the city has had some success in other areas coming up with these plans for tricky development and tricky areas, and kind of set the stage for future development with kind of a very focused plan on that area. And that would have been nice to have here with the stakeholders, but, you know, you can't make people do things. So anyway, anyone else have anything to say?
This is Victor. I'll just, that's exactly what I was thinking, and so I'll concur with your thoughts again, that with anything, you want to be able to plan for the future, and it'd be nice to have a comprehensive plan for this whole area, just so that way everything looks nice or works well together in the future. So again, it's unfortunate that the neighbors don't want to whether cooperate or have the foresight, whatever it may be. So that's what then puts us kind of in a hard position of where we do see, or at least I do see, the petitioner's hardship in this scenario, because again, after them reaching out, it kind of even put them in more so of a corner. And then even with the client that they had to build on the lot, they have backed out. So yeah, I can see where the hardship is coming from, and then it just puts us in a tough position, because we like to have an overall idea of what's going to be happening in the future. But again, I'll just end by saying I appreciate the effort put forth by the petitioner.
Excuse me, this is the petitioner. Can I just throw a couple things in real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that the price that we're looking at for this home is in the 500,000s and not the mid 300s. So we are in the 500s because we're forced to go to the next client or the next builder, essentially. So it is going to be a very high-end home, similar to what you would see in Village of West Clay or a downtown Carmel type area. What we're proposing is basically, we would still build this home, assuming that you guys are going to grant the variance. Obviously, you'd be welcome in Westfield to develop all of the massive property around it and to the east and to the north. This would just split kind of like you have in your neighborhoods like Centennial and Bridgewater and Countryside, where you guys can still try to do townhomes at some point. The part that may also be helpful is that we're both successful real estate brokers. So both Jeffrey and I, and we have very good contacts. And so he's a very nice guy, and he didn't want to necessarily state that because he's a humble guy. But we know a lot of people, and if we had any opportunity to ever sell this property to someone, we could have done that. And we have talked to people, and you just can't develop this little lot because we sell homes that are larger than this lot. It's a very tiny piece, and essentially the only other way you guys could, or someone could do something commercially is if they tore down Kirk Watson's home directly across the street. And I spoke with Kurt a couple of days ago, and he obviously strongly supports a very nice home that would increase the value of his property. So again, I just want to let you guys know that it would put a very big financial hardship on me if it's not approved, because I wouldn't essentially be able to do anything with the lot, and I would be completely blocked out from being able to do anything with it. So again, I just wanted to make sure that you guys know it's actually improving the values around. There is vacant land that the city owns, and they've owned it for a while, I believe, and nobody can do anything with it because of the cost affiliated with the ground, like Mr. Lauer was saying. So just wanted to put those thoughts out there. I wanted you guys to know the price. And again, if it's not approved, it is definitely a very strong financial hardship to own something that you can't do anything with.
Thank you, Mr. Long. This is Smith again. I guess I have one follow-up question then based on what you said, and I understand that that this particular piece presents some challenge to develop, and certainly, you know, we would like it to be developed in an economically viable, beneficial way. But based on the property as it stands, if you guys are both real estate brokers, did you investigate the available uses for the property prior to purchasing it?
We did. I'm glad you brought that up because it's actually zoned residential, and we even had a survey run on it, and everything was recorded residential. So everything states, and I believe we mentioned that in the first meeting, there still could be a way to do it without, according to third-party sources, but we don't necessarily want to go there. And we really do, we've tried to do everything that we possibly can to help Westfield. I've called in the beginning to the people in charge of purchasing land and real estate. I've spoken with the mayor at least 2 or 3 times. I've got the dates. I've sent emails, text messages. We had great conversations. He's a great guy. And he understands, too, why you just can't do anything with that, with that land. You just can't.
But I guess my question is those parameters that make it difficult to develop were present at the time you purchased it. So I guess my question is, why did you purchase it with those limitations on the property?
With the UDO?
No,
we were not aware of UDO. We were aware of what was recorded. We were not aware of the UDO. And again, I mean, again, all we're trying to do is build a better place and improve the property here in Westfield. I guess I don't understand why I'm getting so much kickback right now, and it just doesn't make sense. So we're trying
to add to your comment, Dave. I think I was not involved in. I did not assist John in purchasing the property, and came in later to help with the variance approval. But I mean, I think overall, they had done, had pulled the title for the property, had gotten the plot plan that showed the recorded setbacks and easements on the property, did not show a rear yard setback. There was due diligence done, and I think a reasonable expectation that what was shown on the plot plan was because it was already platted and recorded with the county, was what applied to the property. It was only later after purchasing the lot, obviously, that we found out in consultation with the staff that there was the additional, and keep in mind that the primary concern is the rear yard setback. Everything else is just kind of a cleanup item. The rear yard setback is really the restrictive one that removes the ability to do anything with the property. So it was upon discovering that the 30-foot setback as required by the UDO still applies to the property, even though it was already platted, and remove the ability to develop the lot. So, conversations kind of happened back and forth, and then we ended up here to try to seek a variance. So,
this is Ken. So the fact that the UDO was there essentially is constructive notice to the world of those regulations. So, to today's point, it wasn't like the UDO came along and surprised you after the fact. It was there. And so essentially, you're pleading sort of ignorance of the law situation. And we know, as the saying goes, there is no, you can't plead ignorance of the law. The UDO was there, so there was notice of that setback there. And my other point, that was point one. Point two, Mr. Long, you commented about building a $500,000 house there. In my personal opinion, there's no way I would purchase a house on that property for $500,000. If I'm paying $500,000 for a house, it's going to be, as much as I appreciate and like that area, I would not pay $500,000 for a house right there. So I don't know. I mean, if you build that, in my opinion, good luck in trying to sell it.
Well,
I
answer your.
But this is
well, let me
I
respond, John, real quick. I was just going to say, Ken, to answer kind of your second point first, and then your first point. I mean, to the second point, I guess the only, I understand there's always a matter of preference there. The only thing we can say to that is that we have had, that the market has produced at least one buyer. Unfortunately, they walked away due to some of the delay, but there has been interest from other buyers and home builders to do the lot. So I mean, the only thing we could say to that is, understand it's a matter of preference, but the market is telling us that people are interested. To the first point, I would agree with you, but the only caveat to that is that, and this is just the peculiar circumstance of the property that I tried to go into a lot of detail last time, was that yes, the UDO was there, it was constructive notice, but this property was platted prior to the UDO being adopted, prior to the city of Westfield even having a zoning ordinance. And that is kind of where the restrictions come into play, or where the hardship comes into play, the practical difficulty, because had the UDO been around when the property was platted back in the 50s, certainly if it was platted properly and part of a proper process, it would not have had these restrictions to it. The city staff and others wouldn't have allowed it to be recorded, and we wouldn't be here. But the property was platted per a proper process, but prior to the UDO or any zoning ordinance being adopted, and it was only when that ordinance was adopted that the property then became legal non-conforming and restrictive to do anything with. And so, the peculiarity with the property now is such that if we do not get this variance, the property cannot be developed for the purpose of which it is already zoned. And while I sympathize in the fact that there may be a hypothetical potential possibility of a redevelopment project of some kind, whether it's townhomes, whether it's multifamily, something of some kind of density, I think we can all agree that that is very possible. But without approving the variance, it essentially forces my client to participate in that, and it's a project that may not come. I mean, denying this variance could essentially leave my client with a property that he can't use and has to hold on to for 10 years, 15 years, however long, until some redevelopment project comes along. And we particularly don't think that is that is very fair. And at no fault of my client, we are, if the variance is denied at no fault of my client, he's left with a property he can't use.
Well, I would, Jeffrey, I would respond to that in that, proper due diligence, I think in this case, would have been to look at the UDO. Just the fact that the property had been previously platted and was essentially grandfathered in and was there before, or maybe that's not the right term, but was platted before the UDO. I think due diligence dictates that the UDO needs to be considered, and particularly your client previously stated that he's a real estate broker, an experienced real estate broker, and therefore I would expect him to exercise more due diligence than your typical buyer.
Well,
Anyone else?
I mean, like I said, I was not involved during the purchase of the property. I could kind of leave John to comment on that. But I mean,
was that Ken that made the last comment?
Yes.
Hey, Ken, were you also the gentleman that mentioned that you would not purchase a home in that area?
Yes.
Okay. Are you also affiliated with the Grand Junction Task Force?
I am.
Okay. Well, I'll have you know that some of your fellow members own properties similar to mine and are building homes equal to or greater value than what I'm trying to do. So I'm just trying to do the same thing that your other members are trying to do.
Sure. I understand.
Okay. Just want to make sure that you understand that.
Yeah, no, I know the people you're talking about, I think, so.
Yep. I know you know them well. So again, I just want to make sure that you understand the hardship that you're putting me under, that you are not putting them under. Okay?
This is Martin, and I don't know what Brian, if our attorney, wants to speak up. I feel like we're going off course here from the main what we need to decide here.
Well, I'll be happy to throw in this.
First of all, development in that area is speculative. There's nothing there. There's no plan, and someone wants to put a house on an empty lot. That's what it stands right now. It's all speculative. Someone might develop it someday, maybe, but there's no plan. There's nothing. And there's an empty lot, a residential lot, so someone could come in there and put a small house on it. It'd be no problem. So it's all speculative. Someone wants to put a house on a residential lot. That's what we're faced with right now.
Ms. Smith, Mr. Zager, were you about to chime in?
Oh, I just thought Martin was asking me if I had any thoughts, and I think he stated it perfectly well. There may be a hardship for what the petitioner wants to do with the property, but he still has an economic utility to the property. I also agree with Ken's statements that if he didn't know the restrictions on the property, he should have known. And that's all.
Okay. Could you clarify one thing? If, with regard to procedural rules, if there is a denial of a variance, is there a bar from seeking another variance within a period of time, or a similar variance?
Generally, the same variance can't be requested. However, it's pretty easy to tweak it. And if it's determined by Kevin to be the same variance, he may actually deny it as having already been considered. That would be an administrative determination.
I see. Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? And if not, I'll entertain a motion for the treatment of this petition. In order to move this along, I will make a motion. This is Schmitz. I will make a motion to deny 2004 VF06. Is there a second?
This is Ken. I'll second.
Moved by Schmitz, seconded by Kingshill to deny petition 2004 VS06 affecting 345 East Park Street. Mr. Crabtree, will you call the roll?
And just a reminder, a yes vote here is a yes vote to deny. Mr. Kingshill.
Yes.
Mr. Rain.
No.
Mr. Schmitz.
yes.
Mr. McCarty.
No.
Ms. Fortier.
Yes.
Motion to deny carries.
Thank you. I will make a second motion that we table the consideration of findings of fact for this matter until our June meeting. Is there a second?
This is Ken. I'll second.
Moved by myself, seconded by Mr. Kingshill to table the findings for the denial of variance until the June BZA meeting. Mr. Crabtree, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kingshill,
Yes.
Mr. Raines,
Yep.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Ms. Fortier.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you to the petitioners and representative for your comments tonight. And I believe that concludes. Let me look here. That concludes the agenda for this evening. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I will make a motion to adjourn this hearing.
This is Martin. I'll second.
Moved and second to adjourn. All those in favor? Oh, do we need to do a roll call vote?
Yeah, we can just do a quick roll call. Mr. Raines,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Ms. Fortier,
Yes.
Mr. Kingshill.
Yes.
Motion is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night, folks.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate your time and consideration. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good job.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah,
See
you
ya.
did a good job arguing your client's case.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll catch up soon. See you guys.